what was the impetus behind HR Transform?
I love origin stories. And we actually started by telling the CEO of an HR tech kind of startup about another conference we had done focused on InsurTech, bringing together entrepreneurs and investors and innovation executives. And when we talked about that to her, she said, well, that's really interesting. I kind of wish something like that existed for my sector.
Cool.
That I could go to. And we're like, well, that's actually a good reason to think about creating it, because if someone wants it to exist, that's a great foundation for it.
Yeah.
So we sort of sniffed around, talked to people and said, yeah, there's something here.
And what were you looking to do in building HR Transform as probably the largest, one of the largest, if not the largest, HR conferences and new HR conferences, thinking about the future of HR, not compliance
not
and legal.
That's right.
Right?
So, I like to joke, I only want to be involved in creating a conference that I want to go to.
Yep.
And quite honestly, I don't want to go to many conferences that are out there in any subject.
Yep.
I want to talk to people who are forward-thinking, who are innovating, who are trying to problem solve, who have not been beaten down by always being told no, yet we can't or we shouldn't.
Yep.
And so a lot of the nature of HR Transform is about unshackling from the legacy culture and the legacy systems that might hold back a lot of other companies.
Cool.
So we get people here who are really both sort of feel empowered culturally and sort of from a governance, hierarchical power within their organization, and have the mindset that they're actually looking for what's next, how do I use technology or just change, right, that I can lead in the organization starting from the people side of things.
Cool. And speaking of origin stories, why that interest in HR for you? Like, where do you come from that you've ended up thinking about HR in a future-focused way?
So first of all, I like playing a little role in transforming industries. So I started my career at Capital One 20 odd years ago, and it's sort of strange, but Capital One, their crusade, and they actually use that language at the top of the house, was to transform industries through the power of data. That was what appealed to me.
Cool.
So I spent a good decade there. I left in 2006, took a year off, watched Netflix, played with my kids, listened to the universe. Luckily, the universe spoke to me. I ended up then co-founding a venture capital firm focused on companies that were leveraging data to transform the industry they were in. Fast forward now, and I think there's something really interesting happening in the HR talent people side of the world, whether it comes from new technology platforms, cultural shifts, right? Some of the Me Too that is actually enabling conversations that need to happen, should have happened, and now they are happening, right? That's part of the transformation.
Cool.
So it's probably not a total coincidence that the name of the event has Transform inside of it.
Very cool. And that brings us around to Sempervirens, right? And you were at first an LP in Sempervirens, and now you're taking an even more active role, as I understand it?
Yeah.
So maybe what is Sempervirens first, and then what roles have you played?
So Sempervirens is a new boutique venture capital firm, really focused on investing in companies where they're connected to the workplace, particularly where they might be sold through an employer or making employment better. I think in practice that has us looking at a few different areas. One that's close to my heart is what I call fintech solutions for HR problems. Another really focused on healthcare and health delivery, right, and the reinvention of that, because while that's so important, of course, to people, that's so important to employers as well, who bear much of the cost, at least in the US, of that. And then just the sort of fundamental core of how the practice of HR gets done, right, and all the innovation happening there. So Sempervirens is trying to help those kinds of companies, right, through a combination of investment and through actually helping those companies, accelerating them, adding some value, leveraging its network, leveraging its insight of both the primary folks with Sempervirens and with a sort of broader network that it can tap into.
What about companies that you particularly have seen since 2006, since you started as a VC, that you're particularly excited for?
So I'll start with some of my companies I've been involved with from older times. So one of my favorites is a little company called Credit Karma. We actually, back in my old firm, led the Series A in that company back in 2009, and that's just a wonderful story about sort of doing well by doing right by the consumer.
Yeah.
Another company that I've been involved with, a company called Remitly,
Yeah.
which actually helps people send money, right, across border.
Cool. Such a
which
challenge and such a costly endeavor if you go through.
Right, and so particularly when you
checks.
think about people who've emigrated from often a poor country,
Yep.
right, and are now working in a wealthier country, right, and they may actually now be, still supporting their family back home or extended family.
Yeah.
And Remitly helps make those helps enable those people to do so more safely, securely, cheaply, quickly,
Totally.
and the like.
Cool. We've been talking a lot about Hone, which I know has been a big part of.
Yeah, so Hone is interesting. While I don't think that Sempervirens is an investor there, I know that Robbie and team played a role in helping the folks there think through their strategy and what they're building. And on top of that, the founders actually did meet each other at HR Transform last year.
Yeah.
And that's not something which has gotten a lot of press, sadly, but which actually excites us.
Right.
Back to how does an event actually move an industry
Become a
forward?
hub, yeah.
Right? It actually helps by getting people who might not have otherwise connected, right, to realize they have some interest in common, and then some business happens out of it.
Cool.
Maybe a business like Hone gets created out of thin air.
Yeah. And that's the beauty of what Tony Hsieh calls the spontaneous collisions of bringing
Yes.
people together in the same space. You never know what's going to happen, but it's going to be great.
Yeah, that's right. There's another company called Digiterra, and that we're quite excited about, focused on helping people essentially quit addiction, right? Starting with smoking.
Yeah.
That's back to this notion of there's a lot of things in scope for Sempervirens, right? It's not a healthcare investor per se, but since so much of the cost of things like smoking ultimately get borne in some form by employers, right? Employers care about it, they have a stake in the outcome,
Yeah.
and so that means that Sempervirens is intrigued by companies like Digiterra that can make the world better, right? Help people be better, right? And by the way, save employers a lot of money on their healthcare costs.
Awesome.
That's a nice, elegant kind of investment for us.
Super cool. And as you look at how far HR Transform has come just from last year, the first inaugural year, to now, what are you excited for next year and going forward? What are ways that you're going to continue to grow this community?
Yeah, so I think that this year it really came together, the product market fit, to use the language of startups, around the chief people officers, particularly for mid-market companies, hyper-growth companies, venture-backed companies, really converged here this year.
Yeah.
Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of them. And not that we don't also welcome the senior HR executives from Visa and Walmart and stuff like that, but I think that having those mid-market, hyper-growth people professionals come together enables a very different kind of dialogue than you see elsewhere, and actually starts to make it a more valuable event for the people from the Fortune 1000 companies as well.
Nice.
That's the conversations the Fortune 1000 might not be able to have among themselves, but can participate on when they are sort of in the same room with the people who be the Fortune 1000 20 years from now.
Yeah.
So I think we want to continue to double down on that, make sure that it is a great event for those chief people officers going through hypergrowth, managing through hypergrowth.
Yeah.
I think that we want to make it more interactive. Right, we are aggressive in seeking feedback, and already I've heard great feedback from some participants around. We've added some interactive sessions. Let's double down on that.
Cool.
So that they can learn from each other. I'm really hoping that I can persuade Samara, who's really the mastermind on all this. She's the curator of so much of it. I want to see if I can persuade her to program in something about failures. Right?
Nice.
Because it's great to hear about
Success
stories and all that, but quite frankly, that's far more boring and far fewer lessons to truly, authentically learn than a series of stories about failures. So I almost want an entire track about failing.
Nice.
I think that could actually be interesting, useful, and maybe continue to sort of put our pole in the ground about how we're a little different than some of the other events that are out there.
Cool. Well, congratulations and thank you
Thank
for
you.
putting this on, and thanks for sitting down. Such a
Yes,
pleasure.
my pleasure. Thanks for your support.
Yeah, yeah.